Sairam everyone. Today I want to share my journey to Swami. I was a skeptic and totally surrendered to him subsequently. This is a story for everybody to really understand and appreciate how he works on each person. Just briefly about myself. I am a scientist. I was trained as a veterinarian and I subsequently received a couple of master's degrees in the US and a PhD from University of Toronto in the Faculty of Medicine in immunology. And subsequently, I worked for about 9 years in Toronto, heading immunology in the Sanofi Pasteur, a vaccine company. In 2000, I moved to Atlanta to head immunology at Centers for Disease Control in the influenza division. So because of my training as a scientist, I believe in things which I can sense with my five senses. Okay, that is briefly my background. And as Ramani narrated her going to Swami's fold in the part 1 of our experiences, in this part I want to add some more to how I was in Toronto at that time, and how Ramani was sort of not receiving the support she anticipated, she had expected from me, and how the turning point came so that I fell flat for Swami. So in Toronto, in the mid-90s, Ramani became Swami's devotee, and she was very active in a Scarborough Sai Center as a Bal Vikas teacher and also bhajan singer. And she used to attend house bhajans on a very regular basis. And my both children, they used to go to Bal Vikas, the Sai Center. I never attended Sai Center. I never attended any of the bhajans. So my routine was that time just to drop her to bhajan and pick her up once the bhajan was done. I never used to stay there. So everybody in a Sai Center there, all Sai devotees know that Ramani follows Swami, whereas I don't follow Swami. So most of the calls that come to us are mostly for Ramani. They come from Sai devotees. Nobody calls me. So that is the background of about me, what was happening in Toronto those days, and my reputation as not being a Sai devotee. Ramani was very active, as I said, that in active Bal Vikas activities, and it was in 1996. Actually, that was a Sunday evening. We were expecting visitors for dinner. And things were not ready, and she was still busy with Bal Vikas activities. So that day, I really lost cool. And I just said, such a Sai organization is a cult, and Swami is a cult leader, basically. So she was really upset. That's it. She was really upset. And she cried to herself a lot. And after the dinner was over, once the guests left, and she wrote a letter and asked me next day morning to drop the letter off with one of Swami's devotees who was going to Puttaparthi the next day. And in the morning when she went to pray to Swami at the altar, and she noticed that on from one of the Swami's pictures, tears were coming from his eyes. So this is the picture. The tears were coming from his eyes, and she was really upset. And that day evening, we were all sitting in the family room watching a TV, and a phone was very close to me. That day there was a phone call, evening around 6:30 or so. Since I was very close to the phone, I picked up the phone, and it was one of the Sai devotees. His name is Madan. He tells me that he attended one of the talks given by a visitor. Her name was Dr. Bakshi, who happened to visit her daughter in New Jersey, and she suddenly felt urge to visit Toronto. She visited Toronto. She didn't know anybody, and she was staying with one of our Sai devotees, and she happened to be a talk, and Madan asked her to come to his place to have a satsang and to share some of our experiences with other devotees. So she asked me to pass on this message to Ramni to come for satsang the next day, the evening, around 7 o'clock. I said I will pass on the message to her. And normally people don't talk to me about all this, so he just happened to also tell me that, okay, Prakash, if you want, you can also come. Anyway, that's it. So I passed the message to Ramni, and next day evening, as usual, I drive her to Mother's place. Mother's house is, it was about 30 to 40 minutes away from my home. So while getting down from the car, then my wife says, it doesn't make any sense for me to drive back all the way for 40 minutes and return immediately, because satsang would be over. So why can't I just stay back? I said, okay, fine, okay. So that's the first time I went to a satsang. And Dr. Bakshi comes. And she wanted to share her own life experiences. And she talks about how difficult it is if wife and husband do not follow the same path. And she was telling about her story, life story. Her husband, a very well read man, learned man, and he was a colonel in the army. He was not supportive at all to Dr. Bakshi and her daughter, who was Swami's devotees. And how later on, how he became Swami's devotee. And in fact, he passed away in the Prasanthi Nilayam itself years later. I was intently listening to her, paying a lot of attention. What made him become a Swami's devotee? Once the talk was done, Ramni, she ran to her and told Dr. Bakshi that, Dr. Bakshi, you told my story. And then she told Dr. Bakshi, in fact, in the letter what she wrote was how difficult it was if a wife and husband don't follow the same path. And she writes to Swami that, Swami, you want me to focus on you, and here my husband is not cooperative. How can I do that? Okay, that was the overall content of the letter she wrote, and she asked me to drop that off the previous day in the morning. Then Dr. Bakshi looked at me and points out, okay, is that your husband? And Ramani says, yes. Then she called me, and she said one thing. She just came for me. And then I began to wonder, What is the, because I know work as a researcher, I'm wondering, what is the probability that a person visiting her daughter in New Jersey feels the urge to come to Toronto? And what is the probability that she happens to give a talk in one of the Sai centers? And what is the probability that Madan goes to uh, that satsang and invites her to come to his home to have the satsang? And what is the probability that when Madan calls, this time I pick up the phone, not my wife? And what is the probability that my wife tells me it didn't make any sense for me to drive back all the way back home and come back to pick her up? And what is the probability that the speaker talks about the topic, how difficult it is if wife and husband don't follow the same path, the same topic that same topic of the letter Ramani wrote to Swami. You see this? Then I thought, seriously, there is something about Swami. Okay, this was the turning point in my life. And subsequently, of course, I requested Dr. Bakshi to come to our place, and we had a satsang in our place. That's the first satsang we had. Then a lot of things happened. And then I began to think I'm wasting my life when the avatar is around us, among us, walking. I'm wasting my life. So my intensity has increased, and then a lot of things happen, in fact, and I'll share in the next parts. Okay. Sign on. Thank you all.